There's only one moment in our Bible where Jesus, Moses, and Elijah are actually together. Do you remember where that is? To find out, stay tuned for Reach Out and Live. Welcome to Reach Out and Live, a program of music and scripture and sermon brought to you each week by the many viewers and members of First-Plymouth Church, Lincoln, Nebraska. Hi, my name's Jim, minister here at First-Plymouth. Today we're in the beautiful Transfiguration passage on top of the mountain with Jesus Christ. Our preacher is Juan Huertas, our minister of proclamation, and our choir is ready, the congregation is gathered. Let's worship.
In mid-January, Max Zimmerman, a web developer, released a series of pictures on Twitter. These pictures were a creation of an artificial intelligent artist called Midjourney. And they were supposed to be pictures of a 1990s era college party. At first glance, they looked like a 1990s era college party. I was a 1990s era college student, and so it kind of looked at that, except for two things. The people in those pictures were a lot more good looking than we were, and they were a lot cooler. But then, once you really started looking at them, you saw that there was something not quite right with these pictures. There was something about the smiles that kind of caught your attention. They weren't quite right. Something about the angle of the gums and the teeth. Something about how many teeth were there. A bit disfigured. And then there was one picture where there was a young woman taking a selfie of herself with a 1995 era camera. I was a 1990s era college student. We never took selfies. So that was a bit off, but again, we're talking about artificial intelligence, right? But the weirdest part of all was that the woman had 9 fingers. A bit disfigured. But before we get a little too judgy about artificial intelligent artistry, which I think we certainly should have longer conversations about this together, let's just clarify something, and that is that any reflection of so-called humanity can be a bit disfigured. It wasn't until the 1830s that what we now know as mirrors that tend to be all around our houses became a thing, in the world. Before then, it was a variety of different ways in which we would see reflection of ourselves, whether it be in water or in highly polished reflective surfaces. I mean, this floor, for example, you could see yourself, and you can, but it's always a bit disfiguring, not quite a true representation of who we are. And in the era of social media, this has become quite jarring for all of us. One of the huge crises of the pandemic became when all of us went on Zoom, and we found ourselves staring at our own faces for hours on end. There were some actual psychological effects to this reality. We saw ourselves, and there was something always a little off with ourselves. Do you remember the weird pauses in those calls and the miscues about mood and tone? See, there was something a bit disfiguring about those moments, and our souls knew it. And don't even get me started about the crises in our adolescents today, constantly taking pictures of themselves in different angles to try to get it just right. And guess what we know? We know that no matter the angle, the picture's never gonna be quite a true representation of who we are. It is always a bit disfiguring. We often find ourselves in situations that might seem a bit disfiguring in the ways that sometimes we relate to one another, in the name calling and the labeling and the angry outbursts and the constant divisions that we suffer, all of that just a bit disfiguring. After all, we are the people who claim that we are a people made in God's image and likeness, that the divine life is imprinted in all of humanity. So then we get our notifications on our phones, and we realize there is so much disfiguring happening all around us. Just this morning, there was a long piece on NPR about the war between Ukraine and Russia, and it's been almost a year now, and the continual conflicts and violence. We've been seeing images from Turkey, Syria, and the earthquake happening there, and all the pain and the anguish, and we too in our own neighborhood know the disfiguring that happens among us. All the isms that are so prevalent still in our world. So much disfiguration happening around us. But in today's text, we have transfiguration. We have Jesus and we have Moses and Elijah, and they're coming together, and something amazing happens. I could feel it in my bones as the choir was singing. The glory of God came down and did something absolutely amazing among them. Something was transformed, made whole, beauty and peace, completeness. In that very moment, it was such a moment that the disciples wanted to encapsulate it, make it a permanent situation by building tents in that place. I don't blame them either. Even a moment like the one we experienced together in worship can be a moment that we want to encapsulate. It still transfigures us. Archbishop Oscar Romero of El Salvador was the leader of the Roman Catholic Church there from 1977 till his assassination in March 24th of 1980. And in the beginning of his leadership, he had this sense that in the midst of the difficulties that his people were living through, they needed a word of hope. And he saw the Transfiguration, which had been pivotal to his own formation, as a key text that should guide his leadership of these people who were going through some horrendous situations in their day-to-day lives. So much division, so much violence, so much poverty, so much despair. And he invited these folk each and every week at the cathedral church to allow for God to have them experience transfiguration. He wanted them to capture a sense of what he called sentir con la iglesia, which can be translated as feeling with the church, or sensing with the church, or experiencing with the church. Not up in the high pulpit of the cathedral church, and not up in the protectorate of the four walls of the church, but that they would become the kind of people who were feeling with, sensing with, alongside with all those around them who were experiencing disfiguration. And he invited them to 3 movements as they sought to be a transfigured people in their day-to-day lives. And the first movement was for them to allow their experience of the glory of God to be a light in their own lives, and through that life, in the life of the world. The text reminds us that Jesus' face shined like the sun, and it echoes back to Moses' experience in the Old Testament, where Moses meets God, and in that meeting of seeing God, his face shined brightly, to the point that the Old Testament text is quite interesting, because Moses comes down the mountain, and his face is so shiny that he has to wear a veil over it. So that way people wouldn't be kind of taken aback by the brightness of his face. It's kind of the effect we have when we walk outside on a snowy day. It is blindingly bright. So imagine, people of God, if we were a people committed to be blindingly bright everywhere we go. That this experience of worship that we have here, that this experience of the glory of God that we have here, which, by the way, I believe that worship matters for a variety of reasons, but one of the primary reasons is that we can experience the glory of God. That we allow that experience of God's glory to make our faces shine. And we walk in our neighborhoods and in our communities as a people of brightness, of light, of revelation, of truth. A people of wholeness and new life. That people can see it in our faces. For a very long time, First-Plymouth has been a community called to that idea of loving God and neighbor. What would it look like for that to be the first thing that people saw on our faces? I can see it now. There goes a First-Plymouther. Well, how do you know? Well, their faces shine bright. The second movement was encounter. Now, in these ancient texts, we have this encounter between the great lawgiver, Moses, and the great prophet, Elijah, which, by the way, Elijah, both Moses and Elijah were quite interesting personalities. They have this kind of sharpness to them in the ways they live their lives. And then you have Jesus, and they're in this encounter together. But then you have the disciples too, right, who are observing what is happening, all right, in this kind of place. The Transfiguration reminds us that the glory of God is often experienced in encounter. And certainly there's an encounter we have here with one another, right? And we see each other, we sit next to one another, and we have coffee together and cookies, and there is an energy in the air. But that same encounter, we are being called to take it beyond this space so that others can experience the glory of God wherever we go. I know we want to encapsulate it, and some of us might want to kind of hide in this beautiful space. But the reality of it is that when worship is over, we need you to go into the world and be that encounter for others. And that encounter might be in the most unlikely places. It could be an encounter at Russ's with the cashier and the weird person behind you that's trying to get groceries. That weird person might be me, by the way. Or it could be in 1,000 other ways as we go about our lives and become bearers of the glory of God wherever we go. An encounter that provides an opportunity for that other to experience transfiguration. The last movement is power. And certainly this text is powerful, isn't it? We have Jesus, we have bright light, we have a voice from heaven, a voice that's loud and clear. This is my son, my beloved one. Listen to him. And we are taken by this voice, and something is happening here. And we too want to stay, and we too want to build temples, and we too want to control it and put it in a capsule so we can consume it. But yet this power cannot be controlled. It's meant to be shared. It's meant, this power, this encounter, this glory, it's meant to transform us in such a way that it pushes us out of those places of comfort, and it invites us into engaging others who are in need of transfiguration. It asks us to be transformed, for sure, for our own transfiguration, but then it invites us to go into the world and do it. And in fact, in the Gospels, for this text, remind us of something that happened with these disciples. They come down the mountain, and one of the first encounters they see, there's these other folk who are exorcising demons in Jesus' name. And they get really angry about this, these disciples. So they stop them, and they go to Jesus really proud of themselves. They say, "Oh, Jesus, guess what we did? We became the exorcism police. And we stopped these people from doing this work in your name." And what does Jesus say? Why did you do that? If they're doing it in my name, let them do it. That way there's more people experiencing liberation. There's more people experiencing wholeness. There's more people experiencing new life. There's more people experiencing transfiguration. So we too are called to share the power that we have been given. Whatever power that we might have, so that others who are experiencing disfiguration can experience transfiguration. So imagine this body called First-Plymouth, not just thinking about, for example, retiring medical debt in our neighborhood. I mean, that's one of the ways in which we have been trying to use our power to help others experience transfiguration. But imagine the plethora of ways that we together can share this encounter, this glory, this power, so that others can experience this transfiguration. I'm not really worried about artificial intelligence artistic capabilities, of their lack thereof, although we should be thoughtful about them. But I am deeply concerned about the many ways that in this very moment, many of us are experiencing disfiguration. About the ways in which in this very second, people outside of these walls are experiencing disfiguration. And I feel a call, a conviction to be a bearer of transfiguration. So First-Plymouth, go share the light. Go and have encounters. Go share power. In the midst of disfiguration, transfiguration is at hand. the glory of God here. Listen.
I am so glad that we could worship together. I hope that it has brought you a greater sense of peace and clarity. Do you know you could join our worship services live every Sunday at 9 or 10:30 on YouTube, Facebook, or our website? And all of that is made possible by friends like you.
If you believe that an open-minded, loving congregation can help change the world, then consider making a donation. It will help us increase the love of God and neighbor, both in Nebraska and the world. If you would like to learn more about our church, go to firstplymouth.org. You can watch videos of the sermons, learn about our many programs and missions, then follow us to Facebook and become a friend. We now worship online at 9 a.m. and 10:30 on YouTube, Facebook, Vimeo, and our website. We also add live events, so join us online. We heard the great story of the Transfiguration today. It's a mountaintop scene, a peak moment, an amazing mountaintop experience, but all of life is not like that. A lot of times we live in the valley and struggle. Life is a mixture of those. Once you realize that there's always another mountaintop ahead, you can reach out and live.
Tune in again next week for another edition of Reach Out and Live.